Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, June the 6th, and welcome to our commentary. Well, I want to get into a couple of things today. I'm also going to be remembering some important anniversaries this weekend, but let's go to my American Thinker post that was published this morning over at AmericanThinker.com. And it's this little controversy going on in New York. Now, the title of my post is The New York Tallaricans. And of course, this is a salute to our candidate for the Senate here in Texas, James Tallarico, who has been using some rather interesting language to talk about women. And he refers to our neighbors with a uterus. I guess he was talking about a woman when he said that. And, you know, he's really into the woke stuff. And apparently they want to try something like that in New York because they want to rewrite, or there's a proposal to rewrite the words father and mother in their state documents or laws or whatever. And, you know, why they would do something like this is beyond me, because the words father and mother have worked for centuries. I don't know anybody who doesn't understand what a father and a mother is. I mean, I certainly know who my mother is, or was. She passed away. My father, too, he passed away also. I mean, I know who they were. I think everybody knows what a mother is. She's the person who had you, carried you for 9 months, and, you know, she gave birth to you and, you know, raised you and everything else. So why we would have to mess with these words is beyond me. I mean, what other word are you going to use better than mother or father? But, you know, they're considering that in New York. It's in the legislature. I don't know whether it's actually going to become, I don't know if the governor is actually going to sign it. That's, I guess, the question right now. Because the governor is a mother herself. She's not a great governor, but she's a mother herself. So you would think if anybody knows what a mother is, it would be a mother. So we'll see. My gut feeling is that she's not going to sign it or send it back because I don't think she wants to be running for governor, having to explain to people what a mother is. But nevertheless, this is what's happening with the Democrat Party, this influence of the woke in the Democrat Party that I think it's hurting them more than anything else. But, you know, that is the way it is. Speaking of the Democrats, they've got a little problem up in Maine, pretty big problem up there. And that's their Senate candidate. And look, my feeling is this is a Democrat problem. Let them deal with it. Okay, well, why waste our time getting involved? Let them deal with it. There is apparently a primary up there next Tuesday. And whether he wins or not wins, I don't know. My guess is that at some point, again, based on what you're hearing, I don't know anything personally. Obviously, I don't know this guy personally. But based on a lot of stuff that you're hearing, apparently there's more about this guy that is going to come out that is not going to make his supporters very proud. But, you know, one way or another, he may end up being the candidate. The only good news out of all of this, is that it looks likely now that Susan Collins, the senator, is going to be reelected. And that would be good, I think, for the Senate, be good for the country. So if she ends up going back in or getting reelected, I guess that's the happy ending here. But the Democrats are going to have to take a look at the people they're nominating. They've got a big problem up in Michigan right now, too, with another candidate who has some very interesting views about Israel. And they've got others across the country, too, because some of these primaries are producing candidates who are appealing to the left wing of the party, not necessarily general election voters. So we'll see what happens. But if Susan Collins is returned to the Senate in Maine, that's the good news. And we can appreciate that because she's been a pretty good senator. I mean, she's not a perfect conservative in the sense that she's probably more liberal than many of us would like. But on all the big votes, she generally comes through. I know she didn't on this Save America Act, but on a lot of the other stuff, she comes through. And here recently, for example, when she gave that speech about Brett Kavanaugh, when he was nominated for the Supreme Court. She may have actually saved his nomination because she gave a great speech about his credentials and the kind of man that he was. And that probably helped him get over the line. So they've got a problem up in Maine, meaning the Democrats, and I'm not sure how they're going to deal with it. But I guess that's up to them. We just want to see Susan Collins reelected. That's all that I'm concerned about, and her chances have been going up quite a bit here recently. Well, 3 anniversaries that I want to remember this weekend. First of all, 1941 D-Day. It was literally today, January the 6th, that Allied troops were landing on the beaches there in Normandy. And I had the good fortune of getting to know somebody with the U.S. Navy who was there on D-Day. Now, he wasn't on the beach. He was actually in one of the boats outside. But, just to be able to talk to somebody who was there, who remembers, what was going on there, was a great experience. And I'm talking about my old friend, my late friend, Bob Jaggers, who passed away in 2021. And back in 2014, we actually did a audio or a podcast with Bob Jaggers. And that was on the 70th anniversary of D-Day, when he and other veterans had a chance to go back. And he spoke a lot about the experiences that day. And it's such an interesting thing to hear. You can read a book, you can watch a documentary, but when you're actually sitting next to someone who was there and he's telling you what he saw and everything that was going on, it's just a fascinating experience. For me, it was. Now, Bob actually did go around some of the schools here and talk to the kids, which was a wonderful thing. And I know the kids loved him. And, we were very sad to see him pass away a few years ago. But, these veterans are getting pretty old, as you know, and there's less and less of them. I wonder how many we have now on the 85th anniversary. Probably not that many, because it was 85 years ago. So most of those guys back then would have been young men in their 20s. So they would have to be over 100 years old to still be around. But nevertheless, we salute all of the heroes of D-Day. And I'll tell you one more little thing about D-Day that I think everybody needs to check out. On the 40th anniversary of D-Day, President Reagan went to Normandy, and he spoke right there, not far from the beach. I think he spoke over by the cemetery. And he delivered one of the most amazing D-Day speeches that you will ever hear. It's available in YouTube, and you can also read it. But, just a great speech about what happened that day. And, of course, Reagan had that amazing ability to speak, and that just made it even better. Speaking of President Reagan, we remember that he passed away on this day in 2004. I think technically Reagan died the night before. But because of the California time and all of that, I think January 6th is now the date accepted of his death. But I remember President Reagan quite well. And I remember that funeral and the way the country embraced President Reagan and Nancy Reagan. I think it showed a lot of love. And it really showed the respect that he had in the country. So I was very proud of the country and the way it acted during the Reagan funeral. It was absolutely great. We also remember today, 1968, the assassination of Robert Kennedy. Now, Robert Kennedy was a senator at the time from New York. He was running for president, and he was in California in the primary, and he had just won the California primary. He was competing with Hubert Humphrey and Gene McCarthy, I think was the other one. But he won that primary. It was very close, but he won. And he gave that quick victory speech where he said, okay, now it's on to Chicago and let's win there. And a few minutes later, he was assassinated in the kitchen, I guess, as he was going out of the hotel. And I remember that whole thing. I was not up at night when that happened because it was kind of late. But I remember the next morning, we still had school. We were kind of waking up, eating breakfast to go to school. And I think we had tests and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my father saying that Robert Kennedy had been killed in California. And it was like, what? Robert Kennedy was killed? Yes, he was. And that was quite a shock. Now, there's been always been a lot of debate as to whether Robert Kennedy would have won the nomination. He would have had to defeat Hubert Humphrey, who was the vice president, and Lyndon Johnson's choice, who was the president. So he would have had, that would have been a very difficult convention, I think, for the Democrats. It turned out to be a difficult convention, but for something else, all the violence and all of that happened. So there's a lot of debate as to whether he would have beaten Humphrey or not. My gut feeling is no. My gut feeling is that Humphrey would have won the nomination, again, because of the influence of President Johnson. But you never know. It's just speculation. No one really knows. But Senator Kennedy was killed on this day in 1968 in California, and his son, Robert Kennedy Jr., is the one in President Trump's cabinet. So we remember Robert Kennedy, President Reagan, and D-Day this weekend. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. We'll be back Sunday night with our friend George Rodriguez, as well as a special treat. We'll be hearing from Alan Wall about what's going on in Mexico. It's always interesting to hear from Alan because he's on top of that story a lot. Have a great weekend, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.